Welcome everybody. Today's video is on irrational numbers. Have the worksheet out that you got in class so we can do that together. The essential question at the top says, how do you estimate and compare irrational numbers? So for review, let's look at the definition of irrational numbers. They are numbers that are not rational. In other words, they cannot be written in the form a over b, where a and b are integers and b does not equal 0. Square roots of integers that are not perfect squares are irrational. Other special numbers like pi are also irrational. So for our exploration, we're going to estimate irrational numbers, and here they want us to estimate the value of the square root of 2. So for part A, since 2 is not a perfect square, the square root of 2 is irrational. To estimate the square root of 2, first find two consecutive perfect squares that 2 is between. Complete the inequality by writing these perfect squares in the boxes. So over here, I want to put the perfect squares that 2 falls between. So first, let's review our perfect squares. I'll take the first 4 of them. 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, and 4 squared, and calculate those. So we have 1, 4, 9, and 16. Remember, these are our perfect squares. So where does 2 fall in between? Obviously, it's between 1 and 4, so I will fill these in with 1 and 4. Now, take the square root of each number. So we're filling in the same number here because we'll take the square root of 1 and we'll take the square root of 4. Simplify the square roots of perfect squares. The square root of 1 is 1 and the square root of 4 is 2 because remember we just go in reverse. So the square root of 1 would be 1 and the square root of 4 would be 2. Okay, now the square root of 2 is between 1 and 2 because that's what we just calculated. So here they estimate that the square root of 2 is about 1.5, and they plot it on the number line. But for part B, it says to find a better estimate, first choose some numbers between 1 and 2 and square them. For example, choose 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5. Now they just guessed these numbers. They might not be correct, but we'll try them. Because when I look at the square root of 2, we've already said that the square root of 2 is between 1 and 2. How do I know which number it's closer to? Well, let's square these again. 1 squared was 1, 2 squared was 4. Is 2 closer to 1 or closer to 4? Obviously 2 is closer to 1, but not by much, because from 1 to 2 there's only 1 space in between, and from 2 to 4 there's 2 spaces in between, so it's not that big of a difference. So we know that it will be 1.5 or lower because it's not exactly halfway in between 1 and 4. So that's why they chose 1.5 and then they went with smaller numbers than that, 1.3 and 1.4. Could we be wrong? Yes. So we might have to go to 1.2, but for now we'll try those. Whoops, I erased some numbers up here. Okay, so we're going to square these numbers. So 1.3 squared. Remember that 1.3 squared simply means that you're taking 1.3 and multiplying it by itself 2 times. So we will work our way through this multiplication problem. 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 1 is 3. Remember to put your 0 for your placeholder. 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 1 is 1. Now we add these two numbers. 9 plus 0 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6, and 0 plus 1 is 1. Because the decimal was moved over 1, 2 spaces, I will move it over 1, 2 spaces down here. So we have 1 and 69/100ths. Okay, working a little faster, whoops, we'll try 1.4 squared. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Put the 0. Let me cross that off so I don't forget that that was from my last problem. Now 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1. Add these up. Move the decimal 1, 2 spaces. So it'll be about 1 96/100ths. Okay, now we're still not at 2 yet, so let's try the next number, which was 1.5 squared. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Put the 0. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. Add these up. Move the decimal 1 2 spaces. So we have 2 25/100ths. So let's put our answers here. This was 1.69. This was 1.96. And this was 2.25. Now it asks us, is the square root of 2 between 1.3 and 1.4? Well, let's find out. Here was 1.3. Here was 1.4. Is 2 in between these two numbers? Obviously not. This is 1.69 and 1.96. So our answer is no, because 2 is not between 1.69 and 1.96. For the next question, is the square root of 2 between 1.4 and 1.5? Well, let's look again. Is 2 in between 1.96 and 2.25? Yes, it is. So we can say yes, because 2 is between 1.96 and 2.25. So the square root of 2 is between 1.4, remember, not the answer, it's the original number that we squared, so it's between 1.4 and 1.5. So the square root of 2, right now, we don't know any more specifics, so we'll say it's about 1.45, which would be halfway in between these two numbers. So halfway between 1.4 and 1.5 would be right about here. So I'll put that the square root of 2 is approximately 1.45. Now for the reflection at the bottom. How could you find an even better estimate of the square root of 2? We can do the same thing that we did up here. So we can find two numbers, or a few numbers, that are between 1.4 and 1.5 and square them. So I'll say square some numbers between 1.4 and 1.5. Okay, so now let me erase this so we could do some more math here and figure this out. Okay, so I want to figure out, is it closer to 1.4 or closer to 1.5? So let me actually put my work back, because that'll help me figure this out, because I want to see, was 2 closer to 1.96 or closer to 2.25? Well, from 1.96 to 2 we have 0.04, and from 2 to 2.25 we have 0.25. So it's closer because this number's smaller, so it's closer to 1.96, which means it's closer to 1.4. Okay, so let me erase this again. So I want numbers that are closer to 1.4. So picture a number line from 1.4 to 1.5. I would have, the next number would be 1.41, and then 1.42, 1.43, all the way up to 1.49. Okay, I'll put some dots in here. 1.49, then my next number would be 1.5. So I want something that's closer to 1.4. So I could try 1.41, 1.42, and 1.43. Let me write those up here so we don't forget. And now we'll square them. So 1.41, I'm going to need a little bit more space than that. So 1.41 times 1.41. Quickly, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 1 is 1. Put the 0 because I'm going to the tenths. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Put 2 zeros because I'm going to the next place over here where the 1 is. 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1. Add these two numbers, these three numbers. And now I'm moving the decimal 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 would be right about there. 1.9881. So now let's try 1.42. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 1 is 2. Put the 0. 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Put two zeros. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1. If I could squeeze it in there, and let's add these up. I need to move the decimal 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 would be, in case that's hard to read, I'll rewrite it down here. It's 2.0164. Now, can you tell? We don't even have to do 1.3. If you're wondering why, I know that I can stop because 2 would be between 1.9881 and 2.0164. So I know it's got to be between these two numbers. But remember, it's not between these two, it's between the original number that we multiplied. So the square root of 2 is between 1.41, sorry about that, and 1.42. So I'll estimate it at approximately 1.415 because I know that it's between these two numbers, so I just went halfway between. We don't need to go any more specific than that. And then you can fill out the number line. So let's put 1.4 and 1.41. This is hard to write so small. 1.42, 1.43. I'll do these diagonally so you could see that better. And we are going halfway between 1.41 and 1.42, so I'll go right about there. And we'll say that the square root of 2 is approximately 1.415. And that's all for irrational numbers and estimating irrational numbers. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.